Well, it's Wednesday, and that means it's legal night. That also means we have a whole lot to discuss as it relates to the Russia probe. A former federal prosecutor joins us to take a look at the latest twists and turns and the new allegations against the Trump attorney, Michael Cohen. First, the stunning resignation. Now the legal problems. We're going to fill you in on the latest as it relates to the Eric Schneiderman drama. Then a family law attorney joins us to help us sort out the death of that toddler Emma Marinek. Still a lot more questions than answers, but more details coming out we'll discuss. That plus the Skakel case and so much more that we'll get into in the next 60 minutes. But thank you for joining us. I'm Richard French and welcome to RFL. Now, exactly a year ago, President Trump, he fired James Comey. I know it feels like a decade, right? But a whole lot has happened seemingly by the day. But in the last 365 days, we could and will probably have a novel on this thing. About a week after the firing, Mueller appointed special counsel to investigate possible collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. His team also looking at possible obstruction of justice. Team Mueller didn't waste any time getting to work. A couple months after Comey's termination, the FBI raided the home of one Paul Manafort. Both Manafort and his business partner Rick Gates, they've been indicted on several charges, including money laundering. Manafort, he has pleaded not guilty. Gates, he's pleaded guilty and he's now a cooperating witness with the feds. At about the same time, former foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos, remember the coffee boy? Well, he pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about contact with the Russians. He also is a cooperating witness with Mueller. That brings us to the winter of 2017. Fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn then pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. He also joined the conga line of cooperating witnesses. Now, a couple months later, in February of this year, the Justice Department charged 13 Russians and 3 Russian companies with trying to sway the election in Trump's favor. That has been the biggest batch of indictments to this point. In April, we got the first prison sentence. Alex van der Zwaan, a lawyer who happens to be the son-in-law of a Russian billionaire, oh, by the way, serving 30 days for lying to Mueller investigators about his contact with the aforementioned Rick Gates. A few weeks later, the FBI raided Michael Cohen's home, office, and hotel, and prosecutors in New York obtained the search warrant that after referral from Mueller. That made Trump apoplectic, and he started threatening Mueller as well as the whole Justice Department. So to recap, the past year, 19 indictments and counting, and what seems like countless shakeups in the president's legal team. So right now, the 3 men on your screen are the 3 key players who are getting the most attention. Jay Sekulow, his private attorney, his right-wing radio host. He also runs a conservative nonprofit dealing with legal issues. Rudy Giuliani doesn't need any introduction to folks in our neck of the woods. He just joined, and he's the front man doing TV interviews and basically throwing even more chaos into the whole thing. Then there's Emmett Flood. He represented Bill Clinton in the impeachment case, and he certainly has, of the 3, the most respected bona fides. Now, how these 3 men work together, frankly, anybody's guess. And it brings us to the latest development. This one, once again, involves the Russians, Michael Cohen, and cash.
It's a stormy day.
Stormy Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti, he is making new claims about the money trail from President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, to his client. Avenatti releasing a document his firm prepared. Cohen set up to pay Daniels for that $130,000 hush agreement just days before the election. The Avenatti report allegedly shows one company called Columbus Nova transferred $500,000 in installments into the account maintained by Cohen. Avenatti claims the U.S. firm has ties to a company controlled by Russian oligarch Viktor Vekselberg. ABC News has not independently seen or verified the documents Avenatti says his report is based on, and Avenatti does not provide any evidence about how the money received was in fact distributed. The Times reports that this year, special counsel Robert Mueller's team has interviewed Vekselberg, but an attorney with Columbus Nova said last night the company's ownership is entirely American and that Vekselberg had nothing to do with its business dealings with Cohen.
Michael Cohen should release the bank statements and the bank records for the American people to see. And if we're wrong, we're wrong.
Previously, Michael Cohen said the money he paid to porn star Stormy Daniels came from a personal home equity loan that he took out. And just last week, Rudy Giuliani, another Trump attorney, said the president paid Cohen back. According to Avenatti's report, quote, essential consultants, end quote, received a total of $4.4 million, including wire transfers from a number of major corporations doing business inside the U.S., among them drug company Novartis and AT&T, which wired Cohen's payments totaling $200,000. It is confirmed now that the special counsel's team has spoken with representatives of Novartis. The big pharma company says they entered into an agreement, now expired, with Essential Consultants. They've said they paid Cohen $100,000 per month for 12 months for a total of $1.2 million for advice on healthcare policy. AT&T said Cohen's firm was engaged to, quote, provide insights into the new administration and did no legal or lobbying work. So here to help sort all this out, former federal prosecutor Elie Honig. There's so much to unpack here. Let's leave the swamp out for the moment tonight, okay? And let's just, as they say, follow the money. If you were Emmett Flood or the team of Cast of Thousands, what would concern you most about what has come out from both the source of the money, how it traveled into whose hands, and potentially where it could lead?
So the big worry, if you're Emmett Flood or Rudy Giuliani or any of the president's team, is what's going to happen with Michael Cohen. Is he going to flip ultimately? And what these new allegations do is, depending how they play out, but they could give the prosecution team more leverage over Michael Cohen. These new facts could give rise to any number of charges against Michael Cohen. There could be tax implications depending on how he treated or reported that money. There could be a money laundering angle, and we've seen the Mueller team obtain indictments on money laundering against Manafort and others. There could be illegal campaign contributions, depending again on some of the more specifics as to how that money was received and then dispersed. So anytime you're a prosecutor, the more evidence you have on an individual, the more leverage you have, and the more likely that individual is to flip, to cooperate.
And Elie, the point I make, I'm not an attorney nor do I play one on TV, but this goes more to pattern of behavior. If anything, over the adult life of Donald Trump, we have seen there has not been a great willingness when any funds are coming in that he hasn't chosen to get a taste as well. The idea that $4.5 million he'd let just sit in the account of Michael Cohen seems pretty far fetched, with the one exception that if Trump basically said to Cohen, you're not coming with me to D.C., and he was the jilted counsel at that point, he didn't have a play, maybe at that point he says, I'm going to get while the getting's good. Right. Short of that, I would think if Mueller hasn't already gone through all the tax returns or whatever else, if you follow the thread of where the money came from, it's very conceivable, if the allegations are true, that some of that money went to Trump.
Yeah, it could be. It could well be proven out. And, money is fungible, right? And so all the money that's coming into Cohen, you don't mark individual dollar bills. It goes into one bucket, and then all the money that goes from Trump to Cohen could go into that same bucket, and Cohen to Trump. And we've seen there's all manner of intermingling of the finances between Trump and Cohen, and now Cohen and this outside source, Columbus. So it's quite possible. I think the proof is yet to be there definitively, but that could be proven out.
I've heard from folks that they believe Cohen's already flipped. Is that conceivable, or would there be a broader declaration like all the other folks I said are contributing witnesses?
No, it's absolutely possible. I mean, people, when you're dealing with cooperating witnesses, there's all manner of scenarios. There are some witnesses who take Michael Flynn, right? We learned essentially that he flipped upon his charge. But there are other witnesses who have flipped and are giving information to the government, to the prosecution, but have not yet pled guilty, and we wouldn't necessarily know. There are cooperators who we say are historical cooperators. They tell you about things that have happened in the past, and then as a prosecutor, you try to go corroborate them. But there's also what we call proactive cooperators, people who are giving you information real time, and in some instances wired up, wearing a mic, wearing a camera, that kind of thing. So I don't think it can be known decisively either way right now, whether Michael Cohen is or is not cooperating. It's possible. It is.
I gave an abbreviated timeline, but isn't it amazing? I mean, if you think of it from the Trump side, that the original sin may have been fired Comey in the first place, which has created the accelerant for all this, but that it wasn't obstruction, it wasn't collusion potentially, but it could be Stormy Daniels and Michael Avenatti, whatever people want to say about him, that really could be the connective tissue to so many other things. And as we say, the money. Bizarrely, that's where this thing might come down to, right?
It's possible. You never know where you're going to get someone, right? The famous example is Al Capone with the tax charges. Look at Bill Clinton. I mean, it started with Whitewater and ended with Monica Lewinsky and perjury in a civil suit. So, I think the Mueller team is doing what any good investigative team does. They're following every lead. They're seeing where the evidence takes them, and they're reacting accordingly.
Speaking of teams, the Mueller team extremely buttoned up. Even the recent charge by the president that they're leaking the questions, it turned out no. Jay Sekulow, the president's private attorney, he's the one who leaked those questions out to the press. Conversely, while Mueller has done no talking here and no leaks have come out, who's on first, to quote Abbott and Costello here, in terms of the legal counsel? I'm not being facetious. If I'm Emmett Flood, and I have, as I said, a respectable, more than a respectable bio here, I want Rudy going on Hannity and basically impairing the case by saying, oh yeah, by the way, Trump did write a check for $130 grand and paid him off. Right. My point is, how do you conduct a sensible legal defense when you have so many voices simultaneously giving so many messages?
It's very unusual. I mean, usually, lawyers are usually the ones preaching discipline and to their clients. The first thing any lawyer tells their client is, shut up. Don't say anything to anybody ever. And certainly not until we know all the facts. But I think the question that a lot of people are wondering is this by design or is this just chaos? It might be chaos. That seems to be sort of the more prevalent theory. But I wouldn't write off the possibility that it could be by design. I've seen cases where...
Very curious design.
Well, I mean, look, I've seen distraction cases. Sometimes we say in a courtroom when a defendant's got nothing, you go, what's the defense? And they say, well, the defendant's just going to try to confuse, throw their hands up in the air, get the jury to look this way, that way, put the government on trial, put the prosecution team on trial. We've seen aspects of that here. And that could be part of the public relations strategy. Or it could just be chaos.
I know I'm heavy. One last question on the subject of subpoena. There was reports that the president's legal counsel, whoever they may be, tried to sit the president down and budget out 4 hours. They were going to go through possible questions. They got through only basically 2 questions because A, he couldn't be focused reportedly, and also the questions were basically treaties on how long he could go for. A, do you think there will be a subpoena? B, do you think he'll acknowledge the subpoena or go like Rudy says and said he'll basically treat it as an option, not a mandate? And will Trump ever sit in a room and answer questions from Bob Mueller?
So, A, yes, there will be either a subpoena or an agreed upon interview outside the grand jury. There's no way the Mueller team is not going to talk to Donald Trump one way or another, or try to. And so they'll serve a subpoena, which means Donald Trump can go into the grand jury, or the lawyers can work out a private, separate interview. That's what the Clinton team ended up doing back in the 90s. Now, what will Trump do if he receives a subpoena? It seems pretty clear he will invoke one or both of 2 privileges. The first one is executive privilege, right? And there's a long history of that. Seems unlikely to succeed. I think that's the general consensus. It didn't work for Nixon. It didn't work for Clinton. Then you get into the dicier situation of the Fifth Amendment privilege, which everyone knows from if you watch cop shows, you know what it is. And there's no question, every person in this country has the right to invoke the Fifth Amendment. The president, me, anybody. But the big question there is he willing to do that politically? The appearance of that is obviously very problematic. To have a sitting president invoke the Fifth and say, my words might be used to incriminate me is politically very dicey. But it is an option, perhaps of last resort, but he absolutely can invoke that.
So prediction?
I think that he is going to avoid the subpoena. I think his lawyers are going to work out an interview, as the Clinton team did, because those, like you said, those lawyers are going to want to be there. If you're in a grand jury room as a subject or a target, you're alone. Your lawyers are not there.
Pay-per-view. If they get a camera in there like they did on Clinton here, that will be, as the president would say, ratings gold. Ellie, great job, part of Team Roca here. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, coming up next, we're going to get deeper into the Eric Schneiderman case. Governor Cuomo, he's appointed a special prosecutor. Now people lining up to become the next AG of New York. A lot to talk about with our legal panel, plus Dominic will have the very latest from New York. Stay with us.